Welcome to another episode of Lightspeed Investing Podcast. I'm so happy to have Jeffrey back again here with us. Jeffrey Feldberg, he is the owner of Embernet, who experienced a nine-figure exit, and he now runs what is called the Deep Wealth Mastery. Today's topic is exit wounds. Why procrastination today can rob you of your financial freedom tomorrow. Jeff, how are you doing today, man?
Hey, Philip, so great to be back here. You're so gracious, and it's an honor, it's a privilege. It's great to see you. Great to be back with the community as well. Hey, everyone, great to see you.
So tell me, why is this episode, our concluding episode on the podcast series, so important to our listeners?
It goes back. There's an old saying: you can take a horse to water, but you
Hmm.
can't make that horse drink. And so, the first three episodes, what we've done, Philip, is we've peeled back the onion, to use another saying. I guess we're going to have a theme about sayings today. We've peeled back the onion of how can you accelerate your profits, your growth, having your company really take to the next level, create a market disruption so you can extract your deep wealth. And we talked about the deep wealth 9-step roadmap, the deep wealth mastery system to do that. All of that said, though, I know there's going to be listeners coming out of all these episodes saying, hey, Philip, hey, Jeffrey, it sounds really good. There's the but. Here comes the but I'm really busy. I'll get to it tomorrow or next quarter, or give me a few months. I'm just so busy right now. I'm dealing with the urgent. I've got all these other things I got to do. And, besides my liquidity event, it's years away. Maybe it's even decades away. I have time for this. And they're not wrong in thinking that. It is a wrong concept. It's a myth we're going to dispel right now. Why so many of us really think that. This is what we're hearing from the advisors, from the investment bankers, from the M&A, wacky world of M&A and all the other advisors there. I heard this. So when I was with Embernet, before I went for the 9-figure deal, why do you think I got that 7-figure offer the first time around, Philip? Because everyone said, Jeffrey, yeah, you got a great company here, but there's nothing you should really do. When you're ready to sell, then let's talk about that. And we'll have a little bit of a meeting, and then we'll put you through the process, and 9 months later you'll be done. And it's wrong. It's a myth. We're going to talk about why that's a myth. So as entrepreneurs, when we say, hey, I'm busy, really, it's a lie that we're telling ourselves. It's a myth. We're procrastinating, we're stalling. And Philip, I don't know about you, when you're going through what you're going through in your community with Lightspeed Investing, you're speaking to someone and, hey, this could take you to the next level. And maybe you're hearing the same thing. You know what, Philip, I'm busy. Let me think about it maybe next quarter, next month, and another few months. Let's talk when it's a little bit of a quieter time. But for any successful business, Philip, and I know your business is growing by leaps and bounds, next week is even busier than the week before, and next month's even busier than the month before. So you're only getting bigger and more busier. So let's today, there's 9 really bad things that will happen to you when you procrastinate. That's why we call it at Deep Wealth exit wounds, a little play on words there. For your liquidity event, when you're exiting, if you procrastinate, there are 9 terrible things that can not only derail you, derail the deal, but it can have you lose the opportunity for your financial freedom, for your financial independence, your legacy. Not so great things. So that's really what today's all about.
Awesome, man. I'm so excited. Every time we speak, I feel like I just get this wealth of knowledge. So let's dive into it. We have 9 points to cover today, right, Jeffrey? So how are, I guess, in terms of these 9 important bullet points and insights, right? What is the most important ones to pay attention to, first and foremost?
Absolutely. So we're going to dive right in there. And again, for the listeners, maybe this is the first episode that they're hearing. They haven't heard the other 3 that we've done. The quick backstory is I said no to a 7-figure, created a system that later helped myself and my business partners welcome a 9-figure deal. And so here's the question: how did I go from 7 figures to 9 figures when we weren't buying other companies? Our growth was terrific, but the growth was fairly stable year over year. And we did this in less than 24 months. How do we go from 7 figures to 9 figures? There's a one-word answer. It's a boring one. It's not what people want to hear. That one-word answer is preparation. We prepared. With the system that I created, we went through all the preparation, and that's what made the difference. So the first area, let's talk about this. And I saw this myself. I'm the walking poster child for this. When you don't prepare, when you procrastinate, you are hurting your enterprise value. What's enterprise value? It's 2 fancy words. What it really means, It's the value of your business, what someone is willing to pay for your business today, either as a buyer or if an investor is going to be coming into the company, you're raising some capital, you want to do who knows what with the capital, maybe expand, do other kinds of things. They'll call it the enterprise value. So it's the value of the business. So why is it as business owners, when we say I'm busy, and really we are legitimately busy, I can't do the preparation today. It's important, but it's not urgent. Why is it decreasing the enterprise value? Well, the simple answer is number one, we're making more mistakes. And number two, we're not giving ourselves the time to create a powerful and compelling narrative. So on my podcast, the Deep Wealth Podcast, and Philip, I've shared this with you before and with the community, I've had valuators come on and they all say more or less the same thing, that 80% of the value of a company, it comes from the narrative. Once it's an exciting narrative, then these valuators, then they'll look at the data and the profit and loss and all the financials and everything else. But if the narrative isn't there, it's just not happening. And so when you look at my company, Embanet, my e-learning company, 7 figures. Well, part of it was I wasn't prepared. I didn't have these narratives. I didn't even know what a narrative was. I just showed up like so many other business owners do. And so we're decreasing enterprise value. We don't have a great narrative. And then at the same time, we're making mistakes. And as a buyer or an investor, that this is what they do all day long. They are looking, they are waiting there with their hands, putting their hands together, like, yes, they just made a mistake. I'm now going to penalize the enterprise value. I'm going to write a smaller check because of these mistakes. Because, hey, Jeffrey, you made these mistakes. I've now lost confidence in you, the team, the business. I'm not prepared to pay what I was yesterday or the last hour. So enterprise value suffers when you procrastinate and you don't do the preparation. And Philip, in one of the last episodes, we spoke about, well, okay, how long does a preparation take? It could be 9 months to no more than 24 months. And so here's a rhetorical question for all the listeners out there. When it comes to your financial freedom, when it comes to your independence, when it comes to your legacy, is it worth 9 to 24 months to put some time aside every day to do some internal preparation so that when you do go to market, you have the maximum enterprise value? I know it's a rhetorical question. I love those questions. But of course, the answer is yes. So, point number one is when we procrastinate, when we put off for tomorrow what we could do today, our enterprise value is hurting. And like I've said in some of the other episodes, Philip, I don't know, check your calendar. Every time I check my calendar, I never see a tomorrow or next week. It just doesn't exist. And that's part of the problem. So, area number one, enterprise value goes down. That's one of the exit wounds, one of the 9 exit wounds when we don't prepare. Thoughts about that before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, well, I was actually going to ask you, right? So that's what you made a really good point is, opportunity cost. Okay, devoting yourself to 9 and 24 months, right, to maximize your enterprise value. Let me ask you something, Jeffrey. If you did not focus for those 9 to 24 months, how much more time are you actually elongating the process based on your experience?
Well, you are elongating the process on the one hand, but really it's a great question. What we should really be looking at is what are we doing to the size of the check that someone's going to write for you? And so, yeah, you're putting it off. You're putting off your financial freedom because here's the thing. And these stats we've shared in some of the earlier episodes, up to 90% of liquidity events fail. Why? Because that procrastination, one of the exit wounds, you're just not prepared. You're making all these mistakes. And this is why 50% to over 100% of the deal value is left in the investor's or buyer's pocket. Look at me. If I would have said yes to that first offer, 7 figures, that 9-figure offer, I created that, by the way. I just didn't know it was there. The new owner would have taken those 9 figures and put that into the owner's pocket. And so we don't really want to do that. So we think we're doing ourselves a favor. Yeah, I'm busy. Let me deal with this. We're dealing with the urgent, but not the important. I would say the preparation is both the urgent and the important because our financial freedom is hanging on the line.
And I also want to really, hammer on one important point that I think from what I've gathered from you, the audience should really pay attention to, which is what happens when you come across someone who's like, yeah, but I love what I do and I don't think I'm ever going to sell. Why is this still, right, something that is important for them to participate in?
Terrific question. Everyone, I mean, everyone has some kind of an exit now. And it could be the final exit where you're going up to the big guy in the sky and no one plans for that. It just happens. but no one can live forever, obviously, or want to even run the business forever. So yes, you enjoy it now, but I promise you there will come a point in time where I want to move on to the next chapter of my life, or this is going to be for the next generation. Sadly, and it's very sad, what typically happens, because again, that I love this, I'm too young, I'm going to do this forever. Again, it's another myth or lie that we're telling ourselves. That procrastination ultimately leads to nothing happening. And then either the business goes out of business. Don't hold me exactly to these stats. I'm not far off. I want to say between 75 and 80% of businesses go out of business at the 10 or 12-year mark. So think about that. These businesses, they've beaten the odds. They've stayed in business for a decade or more, but then all of a sudden they just poof, they're gone. Why? Because the procrastination, they haven't prepared. Some of the skeletons, we're going to talk about that, put them out of business, or other market conditions happen that they went out of business, or even worse, they simply close down the business and they don't get a penny for it. Wow, what a waste. What a waste of an opportunity of all that blood, sweat, and tears over the years and decades that we put into it to not capitalize on that. What a shame.
Well, and I think it's probably because they didn't do the due diligence of paying attention to the X factors that makes them different, how they can market themselves differently, right? As well as insights into the inflection points of their industries so that, they can leapfrog and accelerate their rate of success, as opposed to just grinding it out for, I don't know, 8, 10 years. And then on that decade, mark, you get wiped out by someone new who thought about being disruptive and innovative and kind of hits you, from the blind spot, right?
Absolutely. And that's actually another one of the exit wounds, what we call and what you've been correctly referring to as the skeletons in the closet.
Mm-hmm.
When we're procrastinating, when we're believing these myths, these lies that we're telling ourselves, oh, I'm going to run the business forever. I have no plans of selling or exiting. Look, let me take you back to the early days of Embanet. I started the company. Let me think about this. I started the company when I was 25. And if you spoke to the Jeffrey at that point in time, it would be very reasonable to say, yeah, I love what I'm doing. The company just turned profitable. I'm going to do this forever. The profits are rolling in. All this hard work that I put in is finally paying off. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing. As the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if we would have fast forward now, if I would have done nothing, thankfully that didn't happen. But if I would have done nothing, if I would have said, yeah, I'm just going to procrastinate, I don't need to prepare, Embanet would have gone out of business. The marketplace, the change in technology, the new trends would have put Embanet out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love about preparation. Forget an exit, forget a liquidity event. If you're not in business, what's the point of it all? And so another one of the exit wounds, when you procrastinate, when you don't take the time to prepare, and preparing, it could be 30 minutes a day, it could be 120 minutes a day, something in between, you are deliberately looking for all these skeletons in the closet. So what's a skeleton? A skeleton, it's an issue that you're not aware of. It could be a contract. You're not in compliance with a contract. Maybe you owe some taxes, or you're not in compliance in other areas. You don't know what it is, or maybe one of your technologies is becoming obsolete. And if you don't do something about that, you're going to put yourself out of business. So what we're doing, and the other 3 episodes spoke about this, every one of the 9 steps in the Deep Wealth 9-step roadmap is looking for those nasty skeletons in the closet that we can either do 2 things. One, remove them, or if we can't remove them because it takes some time for some of them, we can build a narrative around that. If we're going into a liquidity event, we can speak to an investor or buyer, what's going on, with all those things and why they're there. But when you procrastinate, make no mistake about it, you're hurting your profits, you're hurting your growth. And as an exit wound, if you leave those skeletons in the closet, either they will put you out of business before a liquidity event, or if you do have a liquidity event, because you haven't done your homework, your future buyer or investor has done the homework. They know your business, they know your industry better than you at that point. And they're either going to walk away from the deal table or pay you pennies on the dollar. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Philip,
Right.
on the Deep Wealth podcast, I bring buyers on. This is all they do. And this is their saying, not my saying, this is their saying. Jeffrey, when there's blood in the water, wow, when we sense that, we become very aggressive. We start doing a deep dive and we become ruthless because now we sense a weakness and we're either going to kill the deal or we're going to penalize it so much that it's really to our advantage and not to the seller or to the entrepreneur's advantage. So the second exit wound is all about skeletons in the closet. You're not finding them, you're not removing them. They will put you out of business. And then the third area, this is so important. when you procrastinate, when you don't do the preparation because you're telling yourself that lie or that myth, hey, I've got plenty of time, my liquidity event is decades away. When you just show up, you get deal fatigue. And you may be saying, okay, Jeffrey, what's deal fatigue? Well, a liquidity event, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And the buyer is going to ask all kinds of questions. We want reports, there's timelines, there's all kinds of stress. You're running the business while all this is happening. You don't have a lot of time. And now you're scrambling early mornings, late nights, weekends, weeknights, weekends, all, everything 24/7. You're now going around the clock with that. You've just kissed your money, your health, your time goodbye. So when you're in deal fatigue, I want every one of your listeners, and even Philip yourself, have you ever been negotiating for something? Maybe you're buying a property, or perhaps you're looking at expanding into a new market, or maybe even when you're starting your company, you're just so tired. You're okay, let me just move on to the next chapter. Let's just get this done. Yeah, it's not exactly what I want, but it's good enough. Well, when it comes to your financial freedom, good enough is not good enough. It's got to be the absolute best. We got to say no to that. So deal fatigue will happen even when you're prepared, but when you're not prepared, it happens even more so. And when you're in deal fatigue mode, you're tired, you don't have the energy, you can't think clearly, you're now making poor decisions. You're agreeing to deal points that you normally wouldn't agree to if you weren't in deal fatigue. And that's yet another reason why we want to do the preparation in advance. So there you have the first three. Let me put a pause on that and put it back to you for any of your insights or questions.
Yeah, well, what I was actually going to say is just again, listening in and having this conversation with you, for me, it's not just about preparation, and it's more so about the importance of adapting and optimizing your business, right? Because you mentioned something, uh, really important, which is for Embernet, if you just sit back, right, and didn't do anything, the marketplace would have eventually put you out of business because of the constant change and evolution and trends and the new technology, right? So Charles Darwin, right? It's not the strongest, it's not the fittest, it's not the most intelligent who survives, is the one who is willing to adapt the most, right? So in a
Sure.
way, what you're kind of getting at here is, for me, not necessarily, preparation for the sake of preparation, but in the sense of, you know, adapting and optimizing during the midst of evolving change.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because again, when you're preparing, you're finding where the business could be better,
Mhm.
what you shouldn't be doing, what you're not doing that you should be doing. You're exactly right with that. And here's the thing, Philip, when we're not preparing, the next two things that happen, they really go hand in hand. So again, we've decreased our enterprise value. We're not dealing with the skeletons in the closet. We go into deal fatigue mode. Exit wound number four, we lose control of the liquidity event. And then exit wound number five, very similar, we don't have leverage, or we reduce the leverage in the negotiations. And so
Mm.
think about that. When we're having a liquidity event, when it's done right, when it's done deep wealth style, you're calling the shots, you're controlling the process. It's done with your vision as you want to see it, on your timing, your way, and you have incredible leverage. Why? Because you've taken the time, you've prepared, you've done all the right things, and you're showing up exactly where you need to be. And we'll talk about that towards the end of this episode of what that looks like. And this is what the other three episodes did as well. But exit wound four, you're not controlling the liquidity event process. And five, you don't have the leverage. So, in other words, you're essentially going back to these analogies that we're using, you're like that ship that doesn't have a rudder, and you're just letting the waves and the currents take you to wherever they want to take you. You don't really have a say in that. What a horrible way to go through a liquidity event, particularly when your financial freedom is on the line.
Oh, that makes sense, Jeffrey. So, like, obviously, we've talked several points about what could happen, negatively speaking, right? If you don't prepare, or in this case, adjust and optimize accordingly. So, I'm going to ask a question that maybe you don't get often, right? Which is, well, how does it get worse from here? I'm not looking to make things better. I want to be the devil's advocate and see how can things possibly go off the rails, right?
Yeah, it's wow, what a great question, because we're always the glass is half full. So can it get worse? Oh yeah. We're just warming up. So exit wound number six, for most business owners, this is a very personal one. When you're not prepared, when you say I'm too busy, or my liquidity event is years or decades away, when you just show up, there's a better to good chance that you're going to negatively impact your legacy and your reputation. Because go to exit wound 4 and 5, you've lost control of the liquidity event. You're now having not a lot of leverage in the negotiations. We have the deal fatigue that's kicking in, and you're probably just going to accept a deal, not the best deal, but it may not be exactly the way that you want. Maybe you would have preferred to protect your employees, that they're not going to get fired for a certain period of time, and that your clients have a certain level of service. Well, you can't control what the new owner is going to do or what the investors are going to do if you can't put that into the agreement, but you didn't have time, you didn't prepare, you didn't do that. So imagine now that promises are broken. Employees aren't treated the best. Your clients are just really, they built you up, they got you to where you got to, and now they're not getting the right kind of service. It all reflects on you, even though you're no longer there. Oh, well, look at this. Jeffrey chose this new investor or this new buyer, and look what happened because of that. And that's the last thing that we want. And when we look at our team members, otherwise known as our employees, they're like family members for us. They've been there since the beginning. Do we really want to hurt them? Well, when you don't prepare, when you procrastinate, that's exactly what's going to happen. And Philip, it's a nice segue into exit wound number 7, because what's going on? You haven't prepared. And we've alluded to this earlier. You are under such incredible stretch. You're under, let me say that again, you're under such incredible stress. Thinking about it had me botch that word. You're under such incredible stress. Financially, you're under stress because you're signing all these checks for these advisors and these bills that you're getting. It's a normal part of the process, but you don't have a guarantee that the liquidity event's going to be successful, that it's going to be the best one over just anyone. And now you're under emotional stress. You're coming home, you're tired, you're no longer that enthusiastic, loving family member, significant other, parent, whatever it may be with your family. You're miserable, you're stressed out, you're snappy, you're yelling. Is that how you want your family to be treated? And what we also know, speak to any doctor. The science is now showing this. Most sicknesses, just about all illness, and Philip, with your background, your medical background, you can say, Jeffrey, you're on base or off base. There's one root cause for just about every illness or dis-ease, and that's stress. Stress leads to the disease, to the illness, the metabolic syndromes, all those other not so great things that are going on. And we're putting ourselves under tremendous stress. So think about this for a moment. When we're procrastinating, we're saying, well, I don't have the time, I can't deal with the stress. Well, that's exactly what we're doing when we procrastinate, when we don't prepare, because now we're running the business full time. We're under incredible stress for the liquidity event. It's a second full-time job. We can't do it all. We have gone through our time again. We spoke about it earlier, in the early mornings, the evenings, the weekends. It's all gone. We're under stress. That stress, it's a bad combination, these exit wounds, because that stress goes back to deal fatigue. And that deal fatigue leads to even more bad decision making that's going on. So it's really a very bad negative feedback loop. So before we go on to exit wound 8, let me pause it right there, because we've been going through a lot here, all really painful and not so great, but it is what it is when we don't prepare.
Yeah, well, I actually, think it would probably be prudent just to recap what each point was before we cap it off, on the last 2 points. So point number 1, Jeff, was.
So exit wound number 1, we're lowering from our own efforts or lack thereof our enterprise value. Exit wound 2, the skeletons in the closet, forget a liquidity event, they can put us out of business, or if they don't put us out of business, again, they're contributing to the decreased enterprise value. Exit wound number 3, we're in deal fatigue mode. We don't think clearly. We don't have that energy. We're making poor decisions. Exit wound number 4, because we're not prepared, we're now at everyone's whim. We don't control the liquidity event. Exit wound number 5, we don't really have a lot of leverage in the negotiations. I mean, how could we? We're not prepared. We don't know exactly what we're doing. We're making all kinds of mistakes. And then number 6, exit wound 6, we're having a negative impact on our legacy and reputation. We're not getting the best deal. We're getting a deal. There's going to likely be some repercussions for that. How our clients, employees, how our suppliers are treated. And then exit wound number 7, wow, it's the emotional stress, the financial stress. It just piggybacks on all the other things that we spoke about to make it even worse. And it's a great segue. The last 2 exit wounds really go hand in hand. So exit wound number 8, we're not tax optimizing. We're not minimizing taxes. So we're not doing tax optimization. And exit wound number 9, we may have some legal and compliance risks. So let
Right.
me talk about both of those. Because we showed up, because we didn't prepare for exit wound number 8, we didn't go to a tax advisor or tax specialist. We didn't put in strategies to minimize the taxes that we're paying from the liquidity event. A liquidity event is not how much you get, it's how much you keep. And too many business owners, they have what they feel is a terrific liquidity event. And then guess what? Uncle Sam comes, here's your tax bill. What? Look at that tax. That's crazy. If I have to pay that tax, I can't have that lifestyle that I plan to have. I can't do this. I can't do that. They could have avoided that. I'm not saying that there's no taxes. Of course not. But you can go a very long way to minimize taxes. But guess what? To do a tax minimization or tax optimization, sometimes these tax strategies, they can take years to put into place and to begin to work. And then the other thing with exit wound number 9, the last one, if we're rushing through this, we may have an M&A lawyer, but they can only do so much with the time that we give them. So they may not have done a deep dive. They may have missed some areas. We may have missed some areas. And there are horror stories, Philip, absolute horror stories. The liquidity event is done. The cash has been checked, so to speak, or the
Oh
check
no.
rather has been cashed. And then it could be a few months later or a few years later, there's a phone call or there's a letter in the mail that something was overlooked. And now there's a huge liability. It could be a lawsuit. It could be some owed taxes. And we're talking significant sums of money and time. What a horrible way to have to stop what you're doing. It could even take away your financial freedom or independence.
Mm.
So when you take a step back, when you're not preparing, when you buy into that myth, I don't have the time because I'm busy right now, but I do have the time because it's years or decades away. Wow, look at what you're doing. You're taking your financial freedom and you're gambling with it. That's what you're doing. You're gambling with it because you bought into the myth. Listen, you have one chance when it comes to your liquidity event. You better make it count.
Absolutely. And, someone who's medically trained, one of the core philosophies in medicine is prevention over treatment, right? Because if you do not smoke, the probability of lung cancer will always decrease drastically. So I love, the insight and principle that we're hammering on. Again, everyone listening, please do not fall into the myth of, what Jeffrey calls a just in time preparation for the liquidity event. Start early, start adapting, and optimize your business to stay ahead of market trends. So you will be in the best position to maximize your leverage to negotiate the best deal that you possibly can get.
Absolutely. And so, Philip, you and I, we're not negative kinds of individuals. So, very quickly, let's just do the opposite of this now.
Mm.
So, what happens if you don't believe the myth, that you don't put off your preparation, you actually prepare? So, first thing, you're showing up, you are prepared, you've done the narratives, you know what your X factors are, you know what your Rembrandts are, you've gone through step one, big picture, you have the opportunity to create a market disruption, you are increasing your enterprise value. You're also going through a competitive process. We didn't really speak about this, but the deep wealth way of doing a liquidity event, you have many different investors or buyers at the table so that we can choose amongst them. We're going to choose the best of the best. So we're
Mm.
not just speaking to one. If we're not prepared, that's likely what's going to happen. We are speaking to many, many. And so as a result of that, we're not backed into a corner. So enterprise value is going up. We've eliminated the skeletons in the closet. And if we haven't done that, at least we have a narrative. We're aware of it. And we're not going to have an investor or buyer tell us what we missed. And so we're giving confidence, and our transparency speaks for itself.
In
Deal
abundance.
fatigue. What was that?
In abundance.
In abundance, in
Yeah.
in
In abundance.
abundance,
Yeah.
abundance in enterprise value, abundance in the trust and transparency. Deal fatigue, it can happen at any point in time, even if you're prepared, but we are prepared for it. One of the things that we do at Deep Wealth, we have a whole launch plan. How do you know when you're in deal fatigue? So when you see it coming up, you or your team, you stop it right in its tracks so you don't even go down there. And at the same time, because you're prepared, you have complete control of the liquidity event. You're calling the shots. It's on your timing. It's what you want to do. You have absolute leverage in the negotiations. And we spoke about that because you have multiple parties at the table. You're not going to do a deal if it doesn't positively impact your legacy, your reputation. And while there is some stress, you've minimized it. You've done the preparation in that 9 to 24 months. It's on your time, your team's time. It's not crazy schedules. You're enjoying the process. You're looking at your business in a whole new light. And then you've done the tax optimization. And you've eliminated, to the best of your abilities, any legal or compliance risks. So when the deal is done, the deal is done. You've locked in your financial freedom. You're moving on to the next chapter of your life, whatever that looks like. Why? Because you took the time to prepare. And it's amazing how small, consistent actions, day over day, over time, they add up to massive results. And that's what I love about preparation. It truly is the gift that keeps on giving. So avoid the exit wounds, all 9 of them. You can flip them on their head and make them not exit wounds, but actually really positive things that help you lock in your financial freedom when you start the preparation. Start the preparation today. Don't put it off for tomorrow. Start the preparation today. Your future self will thank you.
Absolutely. And Jeff, since this is our concluding episode, I do want to, provide a brief high level summary of the conversation that's taken place up until now, right? Because for the listeners who may be hearing this the first time, okay, we mentioned things like X factors, inflection points, Rembrandts, right? But Rembrandts is actually a word that I personally didn't even know about until I met you. And so if you're just listening on the first time, I think X factors and inflection points can be a little bit intuitive, but what exactly is a Rembrandt and how does that tie into, this conversation here with the
Absolutely.
overcoming this myth?
Great question. So earlier we spoke about enterprise value, the value of your business, and how do you increase enterprise value? We said, well, you have to have a compelling narrative. 80% of your enterprise value comes from a compelling and impactful narrative. Well, what's a narrative? A narrative talks about the areas that as a business you are world class in. And those would be your X factors. Every business has 3 to 5 X factors, but at the same time, you have X factors you don't even realize. And some of these X factors, you are so unique in them. You're the only one doing it, and you are world class that it's like that hidden Rembrandt in the attic that you're taking out for public display. So, a Rembrandt, this puts you in a category of your own. No one can compete with you because they're not doing it. No one can even compare to you. And this is what gets the buyers or the investors all excited. They're fighting over who's going to be the winner in the liquidity event, who's going to essentially overpay to become the winner because this is such a great opportunity that doesn't come along all that often. Hey, I don't want to be the one to lose it out. So that's what the X factors, that's what the Rembrandts, that's what we're talking about. It's all about your business. And look no further than what you've done, Philip. So with the Lightspeed investing, one of your Rembrandts, it's this amazing system that you've created that really prevents people from gambling, that takes the heavy lifting out of it, that through your system, they can achieve massive success in a much shorter period of time. That would be one of your Rembrandts.
In a way, the Rembrandt to the audience listening is kind of like a signature sauce for a restaurant, right? Or the signature recipe. And it's like X factors are X factors, but Rembrandt's is like the thing, right? So to speak.
Exactly. It's what has you stand out in the crowd. Going back to the Embenet days, one of our Rembrandts, it wasn't just an X Factor, it was a Rembrandt. It was that we had these 10-year exclusive contracts. No one in the industry had that. People thought it couldn't be done. But when we had that, everyone loved it. And by the way, these X Factors and Rembrandts, they're not just for your liquidity event. That same Rembrandt, when I was speaking to prospective customers, oh, Embenet has a 10-year contract with so and so. Well, if Embinet's good enough for them, then clearly they're good enough for me. And that's what I love about this. It's the 9-step roadmap, default mastery. It's not about an exit that's, again, years away or decades away. It's also about today. How do I grow my profits? How do I increase my growth? How do I create a market disruption so whenever I show up for a liquidity event or I'm handing it off to the next generation, I'm showing up with a much bigger, a more profitable business and have lost the golden handcuffs. I can now be like that board of directors for the business. I'm working on the business, not in the business. I'm following my passion. It's all those things that you don't normally see when you follow the myths of all those stories that we're told that simply aren't true.
Well, and the most important thing, right, from me listening in is elevating your enterprise value by doing these things and following these checklists and guidelines. Because again, even if you're not thinking that you will be selling anytime soon, this is basically an injection into your business to help you grow and expand the right way. And if you love what you're doing right now, you definitely need to pay attention to this because this is a framework that can garner more profits, right? According to Jeff's experience and research. So, Jeffrey, I thank you so much for being a back-to-back-to-back guest here. Your insights are truly one of a kind, a Rembrandt of its own, right? And my thing is, if the audience wants to get a hold of you, right, what is the best way so that they can learn how to extract deep wealth and apply it into their own business?
Philip, thank you so much. You're very gracious with that. And as you know, as the listeners know, Deep Wealth Mastery, it's the only system that's from the trenches by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs based on a 9-figure deal. And we make it really easy. If you want to learn more, how this can apply to you, what you can do starting today, what that could look like, send an email, success@deepwealth.com, mention Philip, mention this podcast or the episodes that we've done, and would love to speak to you. So again, success@deepwealth.com, SUCCESS. We all want that success at deepwealth.com and would love to hear from everyone.
And everyone listening, is just one email that can potentially change the rest of your life in regards to your business trajectory and your success trajectory. Again, this is Philip J. Hawk Chan, Lightspeed Investing Podcast, having Jeffrey Feldberg back on again. And everyone, I hope you have a blessed day.